Welcome to MT Mentor, where we fill our cups and share our wisdom together. I am your host, Jennifer Hicks, and I am a board certified music therapist and licensed educator with over 20 years of experience as a clinician, educator, supervisor, and mentor. You can learn more about me and our MT Mentor podcast and membership group on my website at www.joyfulnoisesllc.com. You can click on the link at the bottom of the homepage to receive a free infographic and periodic updates, including previews of upcoming podcast guests and episodes. It is an honor to welcome our guest mentor for this episode, Dr. Natasha Thomas. Natasha Thomas, PhD, is a board-certified music therapist, currently serving as assistant professor at Indiana University, Purdue University at Indianapolis, otherwise known as IUPUI. She received her undergraduate degree in music therapy from the University of North Dakota, holds a master's degree in special education, also from UND, with an emphasis on visual impairment, and completed her PhD in expressive therapies from Lesley University in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Natasha has served on the Midwest and Southeastern regional boards of the American Music Therapy Association in various committee positions, including the Diversity and Multiculturalism Committee. She is currently serving on the steering committee of the Black Music Therapists Network, BMTN, and co-facilitates the BMTN-sponsored podcast, Black Creative Healing with Adenike Webb, sharing in radical conversations, mindful collaborations, and holistic, and this is spelled WHOLISTIC, spelling intended, holistic visioning, yes, that centers Black communities. And we'll talk more about that podcast in just a little bit. Natasha is a committed advocate for creative and culturally sustaining support for marginalized communities. Her current research focus involves Black creativity, particularly identity construction and community care. Natasha is interested in the meaning made behind artistic and collaborative choices made by Black African-American youth from limited resource communities, as well as the Black professionals who serve them and Black creatives in general. Her research and clinical work are inclusive of emerging technology, as well as the perspectives of disability and queer identities, and the unique ways those perspectives and resources can intersect to impact quality of life, identity construction, and meaning making. Welcome, Natasha.
Yay, thanks for having me. Even though it's not new, I still love hearing Dr. Natasha Thomas.
Dr. Natasha Thomas, yes.
Oh yeah, I did that thing, didn't
I? I may just throw that in instead of Natasha, throw out of my, and Dr. Thomas. Tell us more about this. Yes. So let's start, Dr. Thomas, by having you tell us a little bit about your music therapy journey and the work that you do now.
Yeah, so I've sort of followed this like long and winding road to get to where I am now, because I think that my music therapy journey has really paralleled my journey to my own Blackness, I think, and to my own, like, the center of myself as a cultural being. So I grew up in North Dakota. My parents immigrated to the US from an island called St. Vincent. If you've seen Pirates of the Caribbean, you have seen St. Vincent. That's where it was filmed. That was a fun experience, sitting on the couch and my dad going, I know that place.
Wow.
Just very surreal. But yes, so grew up in North Dakota, and that's where I got my bachelor's degree in music therapy. So I was one of those kids who always knew what they wanted to do. Like, my family, we used to sing in skilled nursing facilities as a volunteer deal, and I always was so intrigued by how the residents at these facilities were so moved by the music and the community that was made there. And so I always had this interest in music and helping people. And so I went into college knowing exactly what I wanted to do, got in, got out very quickly. And after an internship in a public school setting, was really feeling the school special education kind of vibe, and worked in that setting for a good chunk of time. During that time, I got a position with the North Dakota School for the Blind, and that became a passion area for me for a while. My master's degree is in special education with an emphasis in visual impairment, so I
Mm.
was teaching adapted Braille music lessons and was really deep into that world. And around that time started teaching also at the University of North Dakota. So I sort of eased my way into clinical work and then picked up some practicum students. And then before you know it, it was here, will you try teaching this class? And then before you know it, I had a position. And all of a sudden I'm in academia. Um,
Welcome.
Thanks. And that opened a lot of doors and opportunities to,
Mhm.
deeper critical perspectives of things. I had an excuse to go to libraries again and, like just
I
dive
love
deep into.
libraries.
I
True
do too.
confession.
Oh my God. And librarians are rock
Oh,
stars. Oh
yeah.
my Lord.
Yeah.
Librarians are rock
Shout out
stars.
to any librarians listening.
Any librarians out there, y'all are rock stars. So yeah, so as I got, this built-in excuse to spend more time exploring all these critical perspectives, and I started my PhD around the time that I started teaching, this interest in minoritized youth started to pop up. But I was still in North Dakota at the time, so I didn't have very many opportunities to work with minoritized youth.
Yes.
I sure tried. I sure tried. But it wasn't until I moved to New Orleans
Mm.
that I had a lot of opportunities to work with minoritized youth, specifically Black youth. And
Mhm.
the experience of living in New Orleans as a child of Caribbean immigrants and seeing the Caribbean influence in that community and feeling like, oh my gosh, I've never been here before, but this feels like home.
Oh,
Just
yeah.
really, yeah, it was just sort of this perfect storm, which is funny to say for a place that's so hurricane prone. But
Yes.
to have this sort of perfect meeting of myself at this time in my life when I was really wanting to dive into critical theories, to have
Mhm.
this moment of being able to work with Black youth so intensely and have my PhD in progress and have that focus coming to light. And that's where my passion for working specifically, not just with minoritized youth, but with Black youth from limited resource communities really just got
Mhm.
ignited. And it was such a transformative experience for me personally, um, to do that work. And it's not, as therapists, it's not about us. But I like to think that the transformations that happen in us benefit the people we serve,
Yes.
and
Yes.
so it helps everyone
Mhm.
when we grow too. So yeah, so that's where that sort of came together. And so since
Mhm.
that time, from New Orleans moving back up to the Midwest and now being in Indianapolis, that has stayed with me and continued to root itself even more deeply. And as I continue to get connected to more people in various corners of Black communities, and more research and more scholarly work and more work that comes from the communities themselves that may not be found in a library somewhere, that just gets
Yeah.
spent from sitting and talking and listening to someone, the more I feel like that passion continues to be ablaze, and my interest in community care and sort of de what's the phrase I'm looking for, de-academizing everything. It's sort of you swing from one extreme
Oh.
to the other, and now I'm
Mhm.
finding my way back to the middle. And making space for the experts in communities who are not the people that went to college and have all the big words that you expect to be
Mhm.
the holders of
Yeah.
knowledge. And that's sort of where Black creative healing has come in, just as a
Ah.
desire to really, for lack of better terms, like humble myself, decenter myself, get an opportunity to uplift the voices of people who are doing this work and have been doing this
Yes.
work. So that's sort of a rambly way of talking about my music therapy journey, but there you are.
I love that. And one of the joys of doing this podcast actually is hearing the different rambling journeys that we've all
Right.
had. And I think there's this really important piece as we share them of being able to go, oh, yeah, other people have had these evolutions, these
Yes.
continuing to come into being journeys. It's not just for
Yes.
me. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And that I still don't think that I've really arrived anywhere. Like I'm still on the train.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. Yes.
Very much still on the train. Continuing to
Yes.
learn.
So you mentioned Black Creative Healing. Why don't you tell our
Mhm.
listeners a little more about that project and the evolution of that into the podcast?
Yeah, yeah. So that began almost exactly a year ago. And I was sort of just having this moment where I was realizing I'm having all of these cool conversations. You know, I mentioned that I was learning from so many people, and it occurred to me that other people might want to hear those conversations too.
We do
And
actually.
right, yeah, yeah. It turns out people were into it. And I also selfishly just really wanted to collaborate with these people. You
Mm,
know, like just I was missing friends in New Orleans, and I was like, well, let's play together. Let's find a way to do it virtually, and we'll work it into this thing. And so it started as a video blog,
mhm.
and so there are 5 episodes on YouTube. If you search for Black Creative Healing, you'll find it there. And they were initially two-parters. Every episode had 2 parts to it. There was a conversation, and then there was a collaboration that would follow. And so you would get to hear different perspectives on spirituality, on diaspora wars, you know, the conflicts that
Mm,
sometimes happen between different members of different Black
yeah.
communities, and trauma, you know, just these really rich conversations. And the
Mhm.
collaborations were so just exciting and challenging, and we were doing all of it across distance. And really, like, if you look back, like I look back at those early episodes now, and I think about the work and the pivoting that we've all had to do post COVID, like it's just weird sometimes how you were preparing for
Mhm.
something without even
Yes.
realizing what you were preparing for. You
Mhm.
know, so yeah, so it started as that video blog, and ran until about March, when I was having conversations with other members of the Black Music Therapy Network steering committee, and we were talking about things that we might want to do to sort of grow or enrich the connection that BMTN had with the
Mhm.
broader music therapy community. And the discussion of a podcast came up, and I was thinking to myself about how Black creative healing was getting bigger than I felt I could continue to manage myself. And
Uh,
I selfishly wanted some help,
yes.
and also just really felt like it would be a good fit for the network and what they were trying to do, what we were trying to do. So I sort of floated the idea of converting this video blog
Mm.
into a podcast, and I said, you know, if we do it though, I need a co-host. Like, I don't want to keep doing it by myself. And Adenike was like, I could be down for that. And we had some meetings and some visioning together, and it just sort of like felt right. And so
Ah,
we've been doing these you know, continuing the mission that was sort of set out in those early episodes with these conversations and collaborations now since about, I think, June was when the
mhm.
podcast first dropped. And now we're getting ready for the end of season 1. Like, we're keeping the seasons short and giving ourselves lots of space
Yeah.
between seasons to relax and recharge. But it's been really, really great.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you go to the Black Music Therapy Network's page, blackmtnetwork.org, there's a sub page for Black creative healing that you can find.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we'll make sure to link all of those in the show notes too, and the anchor page, as well as
Perfect.
the YouTube
Yeah.
link, because those early episodes, those videos, I will tell you, there is still one um, where you dance that
Mm-hmm.
has stuck
The very
with
first
me,
one.
and I
Yeah.
can still picture it in my mind. It was just so
Yeah.
powerful. And we've had conversations for quite a while about creative movement and expressing ourselves through
Yeah.
movement.
Yeah.
How does that interweave in your music therapy journey? What is, or personal journey? What is the role that
Yeah.
movement and creative movement has played for you?
So I've always been a mover. My parents have joked that I like danced before I walked, and there's a picture of me. One of my favorite pictures of me is I'm in this little like fuzzy 80s tracksuit, and I'm maybe like 2, and I'm like deep in the throes of dancing, and I'm wearing my dad's headphones connected to a cassette recorder.
Yes.
And I'm like, yes. So I've always been a mover, always. And I was in ballet class as a kid, but I was always like the tall, lanky kid they stuck in the back. Like I loved to dance, but my body did not move like that. Like I could not do the like keep everything lifted and closed and together and extend. I couldn't do it. And so when my family moved from one small town in North Dakota to another one. You know how everybody in ballet class, it
Oh,
like you
yes.
get tight because you all started in preschool together. So when I moved to this new town and I saw that I would have to like start over in dance class, I was like, I'm not,
Yeah.
let me not. So I didn't dance for a good chunk of time until
Mhm.
college. And in college, I went to the Minnesota Renaissance Festival. And
Right down the road
I
from me.
right, not far from you. And I don't know who this dancer was, but she was in her 60s and it was a belly dancer and she was phenomenal. And I remember thinking to
Mhm.
myself, when I'm 60, I want to move like that. And so I just got like pulled into this world of belly dance and that became my dance home, my new dance home. And I I still have such a deep love for belly dance and I still do it, but my relationship to it has changed a little bit, as I've like dove into that more critical thought, critical perspective. I took classes
Mhm.
in New Orleans where we really sat with the trajectory of cultures and how
Ah.
that has intermingled with the origins of North African dance and changed it, exploited it, like infiltrated it. And so I've had to sort of like complicate my relationship with belly dance. And so there was a period of time where I stopped even doing that because I was
Mm.
like, I gotta find my way back to this.
Mhm.
And in the last year, as I was getting connected with more Black creatives in general, I got connected with Black belly dancers and North African dancers
Mhm.
specifically, reclaiming it, finding their place in it. And I thought, okay, this makes sense. This feels good again. And so it was right around that time that I did that episode with Anika and yeah, so we knew from the get-go that we wanted it to be a movement-based collaboration.
Mhm.
And so once we got into the discussions of feeling worthy or feeling good enough or feeling, comfortable being around yourself, movement just felt like a natural way
Yeah.
to process that. And so I think movement has always, for me, served as a place that I could go when music got too heady, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
Like I think
Yeah.
sometimes, yeah, like
To
music
bring it
therapists
back
into the
somatically
rest of
into our
my
bodies.
body.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
exactly. I think sometimes music therapists, we can get so far into our heads that we lose connection with our art,
Mhm.
and for me, dancing and moving has been my way back in. I
Yeah.
in moments where I can't sit and play music for my own enjoyment, I go dance. And then I
Yeah.
can come back in and I can play music for my own enjoyment again. So it's a way of regrounding myself. And I think too, as I've like continued in attempting to like decolonize my thought process and everything too,
Mhm.
that you realize that in Black communities, dance and movement and music were never
Mm.
separated.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
this idea that they would be now is foreign. That's
Mhm.
new. you
Yes.
know and so
Yes.
bringing that back into myself, that where there is music, movement naturally is, and to
Mhm.
allow that to happen is just it. I find it reinvigorates my work in new ways that I really value as well.
Oh, yeah. You presented on this last year at the national conference.
At
Um,
regionals, right?
was that
Yeah,
regional?
it was
Yeah.
regional. Yeah, it's the
At
GLR.
conference. Was
At
that GL? Was
conference
that just
sometime.
GLR? Oh my goodness.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Isn't that nuts to think that that was that recently?
Oh
It feels
wow. It's been a
like an
year.
eternity ago.
It does. I was just thinking, like, that has to have been. No, okay.
Nope,
So
that was
just a few months
2020.
ago. Yeah.
That was 2020. Wow.
Oh, and it was just, it was that was the one session that was required for the intern I was currently working with.
That's right.
Just because I think it is such a powerful, again, it's a powerful piece of music. And I've really appreciated your perspective on how it interweaves in who we are as music therapists and in the work that we do. So, what would you like the student and professional music therapists listening to know about the use of creative movement for themselves, with clients? What do you want them to know?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is that you bring your body with you into sessions, you know,
Yes.
which feels like a sort of like obvious thing to say, but like everything about the way that you music, your body is involved in that. And that there are
Mhm.
pieces of that that you need to be aware of because you're sending
Mhm.
messages, whether you know it or not.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. And I think when you tap into realizing what sort of messages you're sending or what sorts of things you're internalizing for yourself, that brings you into better awareness and deeper connection with the people that you're serving. Um, and you can start to encourage them to be more mindful and aware as well.
Mhm.
And that deepens the music too.
Mhm.
So it's, I'm very careful of making sure that people always know where the line is between
Mhm.
music therapists and dance movement therapists, right? Like there's no part of you that should be using what you perceive of someone else's movement to try and make any sort of diagnostic decision,
Mhm.
unless you
Yes.
are a dance movement therapist or you have an advanced training in a model of music therapy, like analytic music therapy, I've heard has some elements of movement analysis that are part of that
Mhm.
work. But unless you have those things, steer clear of that. But
Yeah.
you can at least be more mindful about your own signals and your own baggage as it relates to your
Yes.
body, right? and
Yes.
and be mindful that your
Mhm.
session participants are carrying their own baggage too, and that you can encourage them to bring that in,
Mhm.
and to process it together, um, mindfully can hold value. So that's the biggest piece, is just remember your body. Don't forget it. Don't leave it at the door when you go in.
Oh,
And I think too, like
absolutely.
I've one of the books that I've been reading lately and recommending to everybody is My Grandmother's Hands by Resmaa Menakem. Do you have it?
Oh, totally. It's one of my favorites.
Oh, that's
And I've done
awesome.
his training too. Oh,
You
it's over here.
have? Oh,
Mhm.
I'm jealous of people who've gotten to do the training. I haven't gotten to do it. Look at that. Nice. I need to get my hands on a physical copy because I've been like using our library copy and it's such a pain in the butt to be like,
Yeah.
yes, let me sign in again. I do work here.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, because he's from here. He's from
yeah,
Minneapolis.
he's a Minnesotan.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's really cool. But yeah, I recommend that book to everybody because I
Hmm.
think that like it taps into that awareness that you bring your body
Yes.
everywhere, and that when you bring your body, you are bringing all of the bodies that predate you as well,
Hmm.
whether
Yes.
you're aware of it or not. And you're bringing
Hmm.
all the biases and all the traumas and everything that all those bodies have ever carried is in you.
Hmm.
And you got to be aware of that as well, because your
Oh,
body is going to have instinctive responses that you need to be able to clock in
hmm.
yourself. you
Yes.
know? Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
so incredibly important. Yeah.
So
I
important. Yeah.
I will include those links in the show notes. And
Yeah.
last time I checked anyway, he still has a 5-day e-course training that's
Nice.
free for anybody.
I'll
So,
have
and
to look
it's,
into that.
yeah, and it's just a really nice, like, just an introduction to all of that.
Cool.
If you haven't explored that and are interested in learning more. Oh,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. You talked
Hmm.
a little earlier about community, and one of the things that I have really appreciated about both the Black Creative Healing podcast as well as BT Playgrounds, which you can share about too if you'd like,
Yeah,
is
sure.
that sense of community that you have so intentionally created in those spaces. So, would you like to share a little more about that with the listeners and just about that process for you of creating these communities?
Yeah, yeah. Part of my critical process of coming to my own sort of awareness was coming to terms with my own sense of being an outsider. Growing up in North Dakota, the only brown kid, having to explain to, your peers at 5, I'm not dirty, that's what my skin looks like. And like
Yeah.
all of that. So
Mm-hmm.
I spent most of my childhood and young adulthood, even into my like early middle adulthood, having to explain to people why I was a human being worthy of their respect.
Oh,
And I got real tired doing that. By the time we moved to New Orleans, I was burnt out. And it really just was not, I wasn't in a healthy place. And I didn't
yeah.
feel good about myself. I didn't feel good about the work that I was doing. I felt like I was spending so much time on the defense. and there
Oh,
was nothing, like you talk about filling your cup, like my cup was empty and there was a hole
yeah.
in it. So anytime someone was trying to pour into it, it was just coming straight out the bottom anyway.
Oh, yeah.
So, like, it really was community that saved my bacon. Like, it was
Hmm.
tapping into the Black Music Therapy Network. It was getting connected with other colleagues who'd had similar experiences as mine. It was getting to know other musicians and other people that we developed these networks of care for each other. And so when I moved to Indianapolis, I had this, this feeling of, I'm moving from my dream job. I'm so excited to be working with the colleagues I'm going to be working with, but God, I miss New Orleans. And
Yeah.
realizing I could bring that feeling with me, that the
Mhm.
community that I had created was portable. And so again,
Yes.
good old academic me goes back into the books to like
Hello,
make
library.
right, hello library, help me make sense of this feeling and conceptualize this in ways that I can, talk about it more clearly,
Mhm.
and enter into my life care work by Leah Lakshmi Pyepsna Samarasana. um, and it's a book on disability justice, and so many of the perspectives shared in that book are like rooted in constructs from the Combahee River Collective and other like Black feminist
Mhm.
thought and all of these, these intersectional perspectives coming together to look at how communities provide care for each other, and this idea that healthy interdependence is okay,
Mhm.
that we
Yes.
don't have to be, we don't have to be these hyper individualized people, that that's a white supremacist construct that does not
Yes.
serve us. you
Yes.
know um exactly.
Yes. Yes.
So
Yes.
right, so
Say that one more
like,
time. Just
oh
just
my
like
gosh,
right?
we don't have to be these hyper individualized people. It is a white supremacist construct that does not serve us. We need
Mhm.
each other.
We
We need
do.
each other.
Yeah.
Anytime I find myself thinking I'm the only one who can do this, I have to stop and go, no, you are not.
Mhm.
Somebody else can do this. You can get help. Sit down for a
Yes.
second. So really, yeah, yeah. So I went through, it's again that metamorphosis of, you have a feeling,
Mhm.
you try to figure out how that feeling works. You talk to some other people who are feeling the same thing. Maybe you hit a library along the way, get some resources to help you conceptualize the feeling that you're experiencing, and then you start to operationalize what you're learning from those perspectives and turn it back out so that hopefully no one ever has to feel the struggle that you did.
Yeah.
And so I've
Yeah.
I've tried to be very mindful in recent years of making every space that I craft very carefully
Mhm.
constructed in a way that centers the most marginalized person in the room, but doesn't other them, that doesn't make them
Mhm.
feel like they are responsible for
Yeah.
representing their entire identity, but that they can be who they are in the space and know that that will be valued and honored and welcomed and appreciated and cared for,
Mhm.
you know. So yeah, so it's little actions that I'm learning to make sure go into every space,
Yes.
like letting people know up front what my background and expectations might be,
Mhm.
letting them know that those are always open to being challenged or questioned,
Mhm. Yeah.
making sure that people feel affirmed when they engage, and letting people know when I'm having a moment of uncertainty or need clarity or need to, step away for a second and sit with
Yeah.
something, like just yeah, I'm attempting to create the kind of community that I know I needed.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've appreciated so much not only those communities that you've created, but also that emphasis that you've placed on that community care and
Yeah.
realizing the value that that has. Would you please tell our listeners a little more about how community care relates to and is different than self care as well?
Yeah. I think self-care is a tremendous construct, when it's critically approached.
Hmm.
I think that
Yes.
right, yeah, that it's
Yes.
it's wonderful if you can like go get your nails done or if you have a moment to like take a bubble bath. But if you're not in a safe environment to do those things, if
Mm-hmm.
you don't have a community looking out for you to make sure you're safe to do those
Yep.
things, then you can't do that.
Mm-hmm.
And when
Yeah.
people start to get this weird sort of shame attached to a person's inability to care for themselves, then that's when I start to go, okay, now this is no longer, now this is toxic.
Yes.
Now
Yes.
this is no longer serving.
Mm-hmm.
So what I think community care does, that's sort of the antithesis of toxic self-care culture,
Mm-hmm.
is that it emphasizes the role of the community to provide support. It emphasizes the leadership of the most oppressed people in the space, letting people share, hey, here's what I need, and letting people provide mutual aid, not,
Yeah.
not needing to create these systems where somebody can only get what they need by working their way through some sort of convoluted chain, but
Mm-hmm.
creating a
Yeah.
system where people can just raise a hand and say, I need something, and somebody across the way can
Yep.
say, I can help.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so
Yes.
mutual aid, leadership of the most oppressed, cross movement solidarity, the recognition that my struggle may be slightly
Mm.
different than someone else's, but that our liberation is like our struggles are bound together, and that
Mm.
when we struggle together, we reach liberation together and everything gets better for everybody,
Yes.
aspects of universal design in that way. So community care takes a critical look at the relationships between people and says
Mm-hmm.
that that's where care begins, that it's hard to care for yourself
Yeah.
if you are not cared for by anyone
Mm-hmm.
else.
Mm. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. So, how do you live that out in your life? What does community care look like for you? What does healthy self care look like for you?
Yeah, so I try to find time to volunteer where I can, so I'm not locked into this idea that the work that I do is the only way I help,
Mm-hmm.
because
Yes.
there is a lot of help in the work that I do, but sometimes I need to step outside of that and help in other ways
Mm-hmm.
too. And so there's a queer trans people of color group that I volunteer with and co-facilitate and just am present for,
Mm-hmm.
and provide support for in that way, in my community, and that I feel like is enriching in a lot of different ways. Um,
Yes.
and I think too that the way that I care for my family is also community care.
Mm-hmm.
The way that I make sure I have time to spend with my child so that their whole perception of mommy is not, mommy, go work.
Yes.
you know? Like I want to be present in my kid's life, and
Yeah.
I'm privileged enough to be able to spend that kind of time.
Yes.
I'm very
Mm-hmm.
mindful of the fact that not everybody has that kind of time, or space available to do. And so I want to be really mindful of using that time well when I have it,
Yes.
using
Yeah.
it mindfully. Um, and then I also have a philosophy of within my work lifting as I climb. So I get a lot of, I get
Mm-hmm.
a lot of requests to do things, to present for things. And I've started recently saying no more often where I need
Mm-hmm.
to, and
Yes.
where I can saying, can I collaborate with someone? Can I bring someone else
Yes.
in? Can I bring in a
Mm-hmm.
young professional? Can I,
Mm-hmm.
work with someone who maybe doesn't have as much experience in this area but could benefit from it? And that's because people did that for me too. My
Mm-hmm.
first like journal article was co-written with Sue Hadley, and that was a gift, that
Yes.
she reached over and said, hey, you want to collaborate on this, and helped me see inside the process of writing for a major academic journal.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't have had that experience otherwise,
Yes.
so that is care work too.
Mm-hmm.
So it's finding the little ways that I can give, through and beyond my work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, I am so excited that other listeners, students, professionals are going to get to just glimpse the wisdom because if you're watching the video, you're seeing me, you're like, yes, yes, yeah. Yes.
Yay.
Yes. And I just so appreciate, Natasha, the role that you've played in my life as a
Hmm.
mentor, as a colleague, as a friend. And so I'm curious to hear from you about one of your mentors, about someone who has shared their wisdom with you along the way and has really been
Oh my
meaningful in your
goodness.
life.
So I've been lucky to have a lot of mentors.
Mm.
Prof-
Yes.
like just professionally and
Mm-hmm.
otherwise. I early on in my PhD process, Nisha Sajnani was my I chose her as my dissertation advisor until she changed institutions and then had to move to a different position in my committee as the
Mm-hmm.
external advisor because she wasn't at Leslie anymore. But she's been a tremendous mentor in terms of critical pedagogies in the creative arts therapy. She's a drama therapist,
Mm.
and being able to sort of look at my choices, my languaging, and push me
Mm-hmm.
in a way that is gentle but very direct. Like I
Yes.
remember in a recent paper I was working on that was I was referring to the paper "Decolonization is Not a Metaphor" by Tuck and Yang, and I was referring to it, about how decolonization was not a metaphor, and then I proceeded to use a metaphor in the following sentence. And Nisha was like, "Do you see what you just did?" And I was like, "Oh,
Oh.
snap. Dang it."
Or you put it in there as like an Easter egg, right? It's like a video
Right,
game. It's
yeah,
like bonus points
sure.
if you can find what I did here.
Yeah, see what I did here? I'm so clever, except not at all. So, yeah, so I very much valued that. But,
Yes.
maybe also because I attended, that rest session with the Nap
Uh,
Ministry earlier today, I'm also thinking about elders in my family,
mhm.
and the mentorship from them. And so one of my favorite like mentorship moments in my family was from my great grandmother May.
Oh.
And great grandma May used to have a date book with all of her appointments in it. And
Mhm.
all of her appointments were listed by initials of who she was going to be spending time with. And I remember one day she called me over and she opened her date book
Mhm.
and she showed me her appointments. And on one day that was very, very full, she pointed to a very particular set of initials that was M.E. And I was like, "Who's that?" And she goes, "It's me." And she said, "I put those names, or I put that
Yes.
initial M.E. in my book so that people will just think it's just another person I have an appointment with and they won't question it, but that's
Oh,
my time."
oh, I love that.
And so I always remember that, to make time in your schedule for
Mhm.
me.
Yes.
So I've started doing this thing where I make my schedule into a little like work of art each week. So here's my little like weekly schedule.
Oh, I love
And
that,
so I've
Natasha.
started like blocking out, after the day is done, I do a little
Mhm.
bit of art. So I still have to put a little art on Wednesday, but look, there's the word rest in my Wednesday. It's just,
Oh. Mhm.
trying to make sure that I make really mindful space for myself.
Yes.
And that's thanks to great grandma May. So,
Oh, that is such an important habit and such
mhm.
an important, just routine to build into caring for ourselves and our lives.
Yes, yeah.
Um, what is a habit? And actually, you're talking about this a little bit with Black Creative Healing, right?
Mm-hmm.
About the different, like that schedule,
Yeah.
different habits, different ways that you care for yourself in your life. That you do that. What is a new or a changed habit, or even a new or a changed belief that you've been using lately that has been of benefit to you?
So aside from the arts based like calendar, and making
This
that
is
a
wonderful.
part of
Yeah.
my week, yeah, I've
Yeah.
also I signed up for a plant subscription.
Love
Yes.
that. Yes.
So the website is Hey Horty, like horticulture.com, and they intentionally start you with difficult to kill plants, which is great because I kill plants. I've killed cacti. Like, I don't have a good reputation with plants. So I started this plant subscription, and it's been a tremendous opportunity for mindfulness
Mm,
in watering the plants, repotting the plants, finding the right place for them. Just plants require you to take a minute,
They
out of
do.
every day and just provide a little care. And so they're great moments for, little mini meditations or
Hmm.
moments where you might want to say an affirmation out loud or
Yeah.
say a prayer or whatever whatever you're needing in the moment. So
Mm.
taking care of a plant or two,
Oh, yes.
has been a valuable shift.
Oh.
But yeah, those are probably the biggest two is the plants
Hmm.
and the more like arts-based approach to my schedule and also note taking. I've noticed that I've started doodling more as a form of
Mm.
note taking as well,
Yeah.
or like if I'm prepping for a presentation, I'll doodle it out instead of creating your normal
Oh. Uh-huh.
outline. Yeah, I'll create, and so I actually, like, I'm looking at my wall in front of me right now that has all of these like little arts-based outlines of major theoretical frameworks that guide my thought process. Like I literally have, in front of me, there's one that says intersectionality and it's an image of like a intersecting path and it's got little
Hmm.
like blips and things of my identity. And yeah, it's just tapping back into the creative in the everyday, you know?
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm thinking back even to when you were, I believe, working on making your thesis into something publishable and
Yeah.
narrowing that down, and you created that visual.
Yes. Yeah.
Because that
Yeah.
was super helpful for me when I was doing my own thesis work. I was
Yeah.
like, oh, I this is what I need to do. I need to create a visual out of this because there's too many words right now.
Yeah.
And yeah.
I just found it the other day. I was doing some like cleaning of my office and I found it. It's on my wall now too. My little
Oh,
graphic and the, all my profanity in it too, because it was a long day when I made it.
we all have long days. That's and part of, yeah, as we were talking, part of why I appreciate your willingness to do this podcast with us is to be able to share with people that even these names that we know in music therapy, these mentors, are
Right.
also human beings,
We sure
and
are.
and have challenges too, and have things that don't go exactly how they planned, or that, and
Hmm.
I just think that it is so important to normalize being
Yeah.
human,
Yeah.
and not being perfect. Again, when we talk about some of those white
Right.
supremacist beliefs that many of us are
Hmm.
raised on, that
Hmm.
perfection piece. So, what
Hmm.
is a failure or a perceived failure or challenge from your life, Natasha, that set you up for
Ooh.
later success?
A
Or that,
challenge or failure from my life that
yeah,
set me up for later success.
or taught you something
Oh
important
gosh.
that has helped you in your journey.
Right. I've had so many.
Yeah, me too.
I trip over myself regularly. I guess this is a seemingly small one, but I shared this example recently in a presentation with some students, and so it's the freshest one in my mind, I
Mhm.
think. When I was teaching at the University of North Dakota, um, I was talking about the Hawaiian version of Somewhere Over the Rainbow that everybody knows and
Mhm.
loves.
Yes.
And I was describing it, in that way, the Hawaiian version that everybody knows and loves. It's by the guy Israel Kamahamahamahama. And an
Uh-huh.
indigenous student of mine raised their hand and was like, "Excuse me, it is Israel
Yeah.
Kama'awiwo Ole."
Yeah.
And I paused and I went, "Say it again."
Mhm.
And I
Yeah.
asked them to say it until I got it right. And
Mm.
then I thanked them profusely because I was embarrassed as hell. Like, as someone who was,
Yeah.
a critically
Yes.
minded person, it did not even occur to me in that moment that to not
Mhm.
bother to learn to say this man's name was a microaggression, was
Yes.
racism.
Yes.
Like,
Oh.
and so um, it's something that taught me a lot about,
Mhm.
taking the time to really just bother. Just
Yes.
bother
Yes.
bother to learn somebody's name and not
Mhm.
make a big thing out of it.
Yep.
Like, don't, like,
Yeah,
you don't
that's
have to
their
make it a
name.
whole, that's their name. Like, you don't have
Yeah.
to make it a whole, you learned how to say Tchaikovsky, you can learn how to
Exactly.
say Mahershala, you know, like
Yes.
figure it out, and don't make it about you, you know,
Mm.
which I have
Yes.
also struggled with before, you know, because
Mhm.
sometimes you feel bad. You trip
Yeah.
over yourself and you're like, oh my gosh, I feel so terrible. And you want to make sure the person knows that you feel terrible. And so you're tripping all over
Mhm.
yourself. And so it's been a constant process of mine to learn to say less, you know,
Mhm.
when I trip,
Mm.
to just
Yes.
apologize and move on.
Yep.
If I'm still struggling with something, if I don't have it together yet, to just say
Hmm.
that.
Yeah.
I'm still working on it. I'm not in a place where I can handle this right now.
Hmm.
Just, I need a minute, you know, and that's okay. You know,
Oh,
yeah,
that is
yeah,
such an important lesson and such a challenging ongoing lesson for myself too. And
right, yeah,
yeah, and such important advice, I think, for the students who are listening to
yeah,
also know that we are working on these things and that
right,
we're facing these challenges and that we're working on them. That
yeah,
when we're faced with
yeah.
these challenges, we're not just going, I give up, but we're like, okay, here's an area to keep working on.
Here it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, for a
Yeah.
long time I had a sticky note on my wall until it fell off and I actually don't know where it is, but it it had the sentence, "What in this moment does true solidarity look like?"
Mm,
You know, like it's a question I'm constantly having to ask myself.
yeah.
Like, what does that actually look like? In this moment, am I demonstrating solidarity? Am I demonstrating all the things that I tweet about or talk about?
Yeah.
Am I am I doing that?
Hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
I mean, even recently in putting together of a presentation for AMTA's national conference for this year,
Hmm.
Marisol Norris and I working on a presentation on weathering, um, and you know, that construct of the sort of eroding effect that racism can have. And I had a
Hmm.
moment of catching myself in a presentation about weathering. I was talking about it as though it wasn't something that was happening to me.
Oh,
You
yeah.
know, and
Yeah.
having to realize, why am I talking about this like it's something that happens to black people, as though it's not. I'm a black. You know, and so it's just, it's
Yeah.
constant. Everything we're learning is
Yes.
constant and reflexive
Oh,
and, yeah, ongoing.
yeah. Oh, that is so important. Yes.
Mhm.
What other advice would you want to give to music therapy students who are listening and on their own journeys of learning?
I always tell my students, and this was something that my music therapy professors told me, get what you need.
Mm.
Like, you are paying tuition, you have needs, get them met.
Yes.
And I realize as I'm saying that the professor in me is like, oh God, oh God.
In the midst of a global pandemic.
Right.
Yeah.
In the midst of a goal, please, please also extend your professors some grace,
Yes.
but get what you need.
Yes.
Um, you know, because I think that sometimes we get trained to, especially women, people
Hmm.
who are coded as women,
Hmm.
were raised to be demure,
Hmm.
be accommodating.
Yes.
Don't, you know, don't push back if somebody's saying something that doesn't work for you. Don't, you know, and I struggled with that all through my academic journey. I had a terrible internship,
Oh,
absolutely rough.
oh,
And my internship experience was, woohoo, what a journey. Uh, but it taught me a lot. It taught me
yes.
to get what you need.
Hmm.
You deserve to
Yes.
have an internship, to
Hmm.
have an academic experience where you are treated with respect, where you are
Mm.
given the things that you paid your tuition dollars for.
Yes.
You know, like yeah, get what you need.
Yes.
And
Oh.
if you aren't getting it, find somebody who will help you get it or
Hmm.
remove yourself. That there is
Hmm.
nothing wrong with having to say, I don't deserve this and walking away.
Yes.
You know?
Yes. Hmm.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yes.
Mm.
So, what advice would you tell music therapy students to ignore?
Ooh.
Because they get a lot of advice.
They do get a lot of advice. They do get a lot of advice. Oh my gosh, what would I tell music therapy students to ignore? See, this is where I'm like, should have reviewed those questions before we got here.
I love that in the moment. Go where it brings
The
you.
in the
Yes.
go where it brings me in the moment. Um, I think that music therapy students, oh gosh, the things that you believe are supposed to be primary to your work may not be quite so primary, and you can let that C plus happen. it's it's gonna be okay.
It is.
Like, yeah, you have to meet the bar to like get a C or higher to pass, or whatever. But it's not gonna be the end of the world if you get a C plus in theory. It's not gonna be, you know,
Yes.
it's
Hmm.
okay to complain about music history. It's all right. I get it. I didn't enjoy it either. That's fine.
It's gonna be okay.
It's gonna be okay. Yeah, it's gonna be okay. Um,
Oh,
yeah, it's funny. I spend so much time, worried about the things that my students aren't going to get that I sometimes forget
uh,
about all the advice they are going to get that
yeah.
isn't really that helpful.
Hmm.
So I had to like really like dig deep into my brain for that when I was like, what are they being fed that I want to
Oh,
make sure they don't actually have
yes.
to digest? Or,
Mm, yeah.
that like classical music is the be all end all, like
Uh-huh.
let that one go. Or like I know like uh this came up actually in the recent presentation I did for some students. Black student asked about how to be, when you're encountering a black client and you want to let your guard down and
Hmm.
be culturally authentic in the moment, but you want to be professional. And I was like, who told you that being black wasn't professional?
Professional. Oh,
Like if I see another black person in
yes.
a session and they've spent the whole day being, poked and berated by white folks that don't understand them and make no effort to understand them. And then they see me across the room and they go, hey, I'm going to go, hey, right back. Like, that's fine.
Yeah.
So that's a big piece for minoritized students too.
Hmm.
Like, any advice that someone tries to give you to tell you that
Hmm.
your culturally authentic self is not
Yes.
professional, you can just
Yes.
toss that right out the window.
Hmm.
Throw it in the trash.
Don't digest that.
Don't digest it. Yeah, don't. Wait till they leave the room and spit it into your napkin.
Oh, I'm a
Mm,
very
mm,
visual
mm,
person
mm.
and I love that imagery.
Mhm.
Oh, bring on the metaphors for me.
Yes, love it.
So
Oh.
you've already mentioned one of the books that has been important for you. What
Mhm.
other books and music have most influenced your life, Natasha?
I think, oh gosh, I think the music might be the easier one.
Mm.
Jamila Woods' Legacy album. Oh my gosh. I don't even remember exactly when that album came into my life, but I refer to it all the time.
Ah,
It's each of the tracks is named for a major legend of Black creative thought. And
ah,
so there's a track that's titled Eartha for Eartha Kitt.
mm,
There's a track that's called Baldwin for James Baldwin. There's tracks for Miles Davis for Muddy Waters. And each one of them is like a thought poem unto itself, like from the perspective of that person. Some of it actually
ah,
uses language from that person, like the Eartha Kitt song
yeah.
includes the lyric, "Who's gonna share my love for me with me," which is based off of an actual Eartha Kitt quote about when she's in relationships, she falls in love with herself and she wants
Mm,
someone to share that with her. And there's so many gems in that album, and there's so much affirmation in that album for
yeah.
me. Just yeah, that I feel like there's tremendous depth in there. um but yeah, as far as books go, aside from the two that I've mentioned already, it's hard to think of another one that's been as prevalent in my life as those two,
We'll
as the
just use
mannequin.
this as an opportunity to premiere this
That.
book that
Oh yeah, I'm in
is
a
going to
book.
be influential in your lives, listeners.
Nicely done. You had that locked and loaded.
I had it ready. Well, I may have snuck ahead and read your chapter. So if you're not watching the video and you can't see what I'm holding up, it is The New Music Therapy in a Multicultural Context, a handbook for music therapy students and professionals by Melita Belgrave. And here I'm going to ask for help with the pronunciation of the name.
Oh, Sunga. Sunga.
Sunga
Yeah.
thing. Yeah,
Yeah.
yes. Oh, I should do my
Yeah.
homework first. So
That's
lesson
all
taken.
right.
Thank you. Anyway, and Natasha has a chapter in here on
Hmm.
movement.
Yeah.
As a matter
Yeah.
of fact, I was so
Yeah.
excited when I saw that. I was just looking through what the chapters were, and I'm like, oh,
Well, it's so wild because that chapter, I started writing that when I was living in New Orleans. And so it's so funny for me to read it now
ah,
and to read moments where I mention New Orleans, I think, in the present tense. And it's just like, yeah, I
mm,
wrote that when we were still living there. I've got another chapter that'll be coming out in another book at some point that
ooh,
also was written in the same year. And so it's been really, but that one, it's been really interesting because I've had a couple extra opportunities to update it because it's a personal perspectives chapter.
mm,
And so it's, yeah, it's been interesting to look at those types of writings that are
yes,
like deeply connected to my own personal history and
mm-hmm.
and see how I'm continuing to develop and grow
Yeah,
and yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
Oh,
Hmm.
thank you.
Thank you.
So, continuing along lines of music and personal
Uh-huh.
histories, if you
Uh-huh.
had a theme song, Dr. Natasha Thomas, what would it be?
Oh my goodness. If I had a theme song, what would it be? So now I'm like going down the list of all the tracks on that Jamila Woods album because I think it
Ah,
would be one of those. I think it would be one of those. I rotate periodically between uh, different tracks. So there's in the
mm-hmm,
Miles Davis one, and I think it's just called Miles.
mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, actually, nope. I'm gonna change my answer. I'm
You
gonna
can
change my
change your
answer.
answer. Go for it.
I'm gonna shift it to Solange. Solange Knowles. FUBU, For Us by Us.
Mhm.
I think it might be. I think it might be that one. Yeah, because there's been this huge shift in my work where I'm, like I mentioned, I'm saying no to a lot of things more often.
Yeah.
I'm being very, very focused on blackness as the center of things.
Mm,
And that's the whole center of that track of Solange's For Us by Us. Like it
uh,
literally, I'm going to be careful with the profanity, but this ish is for us. This ish you
mhm.
can't touch, and this idea of
Yeah.
creating spaces that are for us by us
Yes.
is very much sort of where I'm at these days. And I don't, I pop up periodically to do, the occasional like training or workshop, and then I burrow back down,
Mm,
because
mm,
I feel like my recovery time for those types of things is longer now. That like
yeah.
I used to be
Yeah.
able to do, like I'm going to do this training over here and I'm leading this workshop over there, and now I'm like I do one and I got to go underground for 2 weeks.
Yes.
I
With your
gotta go take care of
community.
myself with my community.
Yes.
Exactly. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that
Oh,
might be it. That might be it.
that is awesome. We actually have, so on the YouTube version
Hmm.
of this podcast, we have the theme songs for each of the guests too, which
I
is
love
really
it.
fun. So it's become a one of my favorite playlists to go back to because it's just so fascinating to see what resonates for different people.
Yes.
And yeah, oh,
Hmm.
awesome.
That's it.
Oh, so as we're finishing up, what words of wisdom from you or from someone else would you like to leave the listeners with today?
What do I want to leave the listeners with today? Oh man, that piece of advice for students of get what you need is sitting
Mhm.
in my head.
Yeah, it's
But
it's worth
yeah.
repeating. So
It is, right? Yeah, get what you need. But also, this other thing that just popped into my head. You know that like it's a GIF now that you can get. It's all the black women sitting around the table going, "Who said that? Who said that? Who said that?" That's another one that's coming into my head for some reason right now. That's just, interrogate the things that you've been fed, you
yes.
know? Who said that? Who gave that to you?
Mhm.
What
Oh,
sort of motives might that person have had? What sorts of motives might they still have?
mhm.
You know?
Yeah.
Interrogate everything.
Mhm.
Yeah. And it's
Yeah.
funny because as I say that, I think sometimes what people think interrogating everything means that you're like this bitter, like jaded person. And
Yeah.
actually, I find it rather freeing if I go into
Yes.
every interaction saying, I don't think I can trust you yet. Let's find out.
Mhm.
I actually feel freer and safer that way,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
taking
Well, and
my
you,
space.
yes, and even for me, I know just going into situations knowing that I don't know everything
Hmm.
and they don't know everything.
Right.
And so it's okay for me to question everything
Yes,
and
yeah.
to go, yeah, I don't have to trust that you're saying that that's actually true.
Right, yeah. And
Mhm.
that I can do that in a way that yields genuine curiosity,
Yes.
and that it doesn't have to be like me saying or asking who said that or I don't
Yeah.
know if I can trust that yet is not an immediate leap to judgment.
No.
If anything, it's the creating of space for exploration,
Hmm. Yeah.
So I think keep that in your mind too, that as you critically ask these questions, that the questions aren't the end. The
No.
questions are supposed to be the opening of a door.
Yes. Yeah. Because the judgment actually stops the questions.
It does.
And
Yeah.
so if we're questioning them, we're, yeah.
Hmm.
Whoa.
You got so excited you just
I
knocked your
did.
pop filter right off your mic.
I always love the video versions of these podcasts simply because you get all this fun stuff.
You do. But I
So,
also love, like, as a random, like, sign from the universe, like, whenever something like that happens that, like, causes you to go, ugh,
ah,
I always
yeah,
think, what was just said? What was just
something
said? Because
important.
that might be something important. It reminds me of,
Yeah.
now I'm rambling. Feel free to stop me at any point. But when I used to co own a belly dance studio in North Dakota, we used to listen to the recordings of Kulthum, who is or who was a major figure in Egyptian music, and all
Mm.
of her recordings are of her with a live audience. Like, I don't think I've ever heard a recording of Kulthum where she sat in a studio to sing. It's
Ah,
always live audience,
yeah.
and so you would always hear like these long instrumentals before she would even come on the stage, and then these bursts of applause when she would come on
Mhm.
stage, and then when she would sing there would be moments where she would rise to a crescendo and then more applause, more applause.
Mm.
So we used to, at the studio, my troop mates and I, during our meetings, used to leave recordings of Kulthum playing. And at moments periodically when applause would rise, we would say, oh, what was just said? Because that must have been important. So we used the music of Kulthum as this like barometer for making sure that all the important ideas were being noted because Kulthum's music had just risen to a crescendo and there was an applause. So yeah.
Oh, so fun. Oh, Natasha, whose voice in music therapy? You talked about, and I want to use your phrase here, lifting while you climb.
Yes.
Whose voice in music therapy would you like to amplify today?
Whose voice in music therapy would I like to amplify today? Goodness. The name that's coming to mind because I have a presentation with her coming up is Shantice Hunt. she's a
Oh, yeah, yeah,
yeah, she's
yeah,
a
yeah, yeah,
Black music therapist in Minnesota, and she and I have
yeah.
had
Yes.
some tremendous conversations already just about the sort of severing that can happen for minoritized
Mm,
students from themselves and their cultures in their music therapy training, and looking at ways to sort of combat that. And so it's been a pleasure to work with her so far, and I'm looking forward to getting to
yeah.
know her more, and just grateful for her and other young professionals like her that are asking those types of questions,
Hmm.
and willing to, like she and I had never met before, and I got the opportunity to speak for an event
Yeah.
from the Minnesota
Hmm.
Association, and I reached out to the Black Music Therapy Network and was like, "Who's in Minnesota?"
That's awesome.
Like, you can take
Yeah.
this gig or we can do it together. And Shantice was like, I'll do it with you. And so here we are. So shout out to
Ah,
Shantice Hunt. Yeah.
yes. Oh, and I'm so looking forward to that presentation. So
Yeah. Yeah.
thank you
It'll
for
be
saying
fun.
yes, and thank you for saying yes
Yes.
including Shantice. I'll look forward to learning from both of you.
Yeah.
So let's take a moment before we finish up to tell our
Mhm.
listeners how they can continue to support and learn from you. And I'll make sure to include all the links in our show notes as well.
Cool. Yeah, definitely check out Black Creative Healing on the Black Music Therapy Network's page. And in general, the Black Music Therapy Network just is phenomenal.
Yes.
Marisol Norris is just
Oh,
a rock star. And
yes.
y'all should be following everything that's happening out of that page and that network.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, so that's a big one.
Yeah.
The BT Playgrounds project that my spouse and I do, we didn't really talk much about, but
Yeah.
if you're
Share a little
at
about it.
if
Yeah.
you're at National Conference, and you feel like having some fun in one of the virtual jam rooms, we're hosting the Collaborave, which is an opportunity for folks to literally control my husband's computer. from the comfort of your own home. He's built this giant musical playground in Ableton where you can
Mhm.
click your mouse or click keys on your keyboard to trigger effects, and it's an hour and a half of just music and options to control it with your cell phone camera, like your cell phone flashlight. So there's motion control options. There's going to be a Dropbox feature where you can just plop sounds in and he'll put them into the mix. Or if you wanted to jam on your own instrument in your own space and then send it via Dropbox, you can put it in. And so that's part of a broader work where we're
Mhm.
creating opportunities for music therapists to learn more about Ableton and clinical applications of music technology into their work. And so yeah, so that's another thing to look into. That's
Mhm.
btplaygrounds.com.
And
Also,
I can just
yeah,
speak from personal experience.
yeah.
The courses are phenomenal. And when we
Yay.
were talking earlier about those communities, I know for me, I
Mm-hmm.
was just actually sharing with another music therapist today that it was one of the gifts to myself over this
Hmm.
past year,
Yeah.
um, because it's not an area that I've done a lot of playing around in as a musician,
Mm-hmm.
just for myself, like to just explore in the music and
Yes.
spend time in the music just for me. That's not connected in
Right.
my head with any work I'm doing right now or that I need to get done for a client or that, but that can just be a totally free, beautiful community to play in.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
I'm grateful to you and Bernie for creating that
Well,
space.
thank you.
So
Yeah,
yeah,
and we're
yeah,
we're grateful to be connected to so many other cool like music therapists doing work that's in Ableton or related to
yeah.
other things. You know, the new Tech Nook that just came out that Gabby
Yes,
Banson has put
yes.
together, that we're grateful to be part of that as well. Like that's a tremendous resource for
Mm,
music therapists interested in music technology. So definitely
yep,
strongly recommend that as well. But yeah, I think those would be the big three links, I think, for Black Creative Healing, for BT Playgrounds, and checking out the Tech Nook too. But yeah,
we will include all of those. Yes.
wonderful.
Oh, thank you again, Natasha, for joining
Yes.
us today. And thank you to all of our listeners as
Hmm.
well. If you haven't already done so, please make sure to subscribe to this MT Mentor podcast today so that you don't miss an episode. And if you want to dive deeper into some of these practices, you can also learn about and join our private membership group at joyfulnoisesllc.com/mt-mentor. That's joyfulnoisesllc.com/MT-mentor. All music therapy students and professionals are welcome, and equity-based pricing is available. Subscribe to this free MT Mentor podcast and join our membership group today. MT Mentor, let's fill our cups and share our wisdom together.